Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay. I pray you all well, inshallah. The title of the session is They Will Come Unto Him Well Pleased. I know the title is a bit of a mystery, but I will allow Sister Sumara Khan to shed light on it. Sister Sumara Khan is a lecturer and a teacher of Islamic studies in Arabic based in New Jersey. Her journey began as a student of Arabic under the renowned Imam Salah al-Hajj and culminated with the pursuit of formal Islamic learning in Syria, where she spent a number of years at the prestigious Abu Hamad Institute in Damascus, graduating first in her class with a diploma in Arabic and Islamic studies. While in Damascus, she earned the admiration of her teachers and peers and served as a translator for the Grand Lake Mufti of Syria, Sheikh Ahmed Kostaro, in the sister classes. She holds scholarly licenses, ijazah, in Quran, in the readings of Hafs and Shu'bah, in the 6 books of Hadith and Muwatta of Imam Malik, the 40 Hadith of Imam Nawawi, and various classical texts. She also possesses a general ijazah to transmit from the well-known Dr. Akram Nadwi and Sheikh Walid Idris. She is involved with Al-Maghrib Institute and was a single top scorer of more than 200 students at the Summit Annual Intensive. Sumara Khan is also an alumna of Young Muslims, and she teaches Tajweed at the Quran Literacy Institute in Somerset, New Jersey. She is a mother of 3 and married to Dr. Abu Zayd and lives in Piscataway, New Jersey. So without any further ado, Sister Sumara Khan, take it away.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa taslim ala Sayyidina Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Can everybody hear me in the back? Today, inshallah, we're going to be speaking about the concept of pleasing and becoming pleased. As the sister alluded to earlier, the cap. It's like a soft.
Yeah.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Yes. So the sister introduced the topic as come on to me well pleased. What is the meaning of pleasure? We're going to explore the different aspects of pleasure, what it is really to become pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what is it to experience pleasure yourself. Now, this desire of pleasure transcends all cultures. You will find it in all societies throughout, all cultures in human history. There's always been this constant pursuit. Every, people, nation, historical time period has this, a desire that cannot be suppressed, a desire to pursue pleasure and happiness. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us Islam to attain this utmost desire of pleasure. Believe it or not, one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us is happiness and pleasure. Now, how does this make sense? Some of you must be thinking, when there's so many things that I want to do to experience pleasure, but Islam says I can't do them. I can't have my makeup and my music and my movies, the way I want them. And these things bring me pleasure. So how is it that Islam then promises pleasure when it is in these things that I find it and I can't have it, at least not without guilt? Now, this is where we want to distinguish between happiness and pleasure. There's a difference. Pleasure is a fleeting feeling, a temporary feeling, whereas happiness is an everlasting state. It can become an everlasting state. Pleasure may be attained through lawful or unlawful means. You can attain pleasure through halal means or through haram means, and you will experience this pleasure rush. But true happiness you will not find except in the halal, except in that which is lawful. Now, ours, of course, is a culture that deeply values pleasure and the pursuit of pleasure, deeply emphasizes and capitalizes profits financially on this whole industry of pleasure. Now, the societal trend here has been to allow women a role that maximizes the pleasure of society, of men, right? So this is why we have this overwhelming emphasis on physical appeal, on appearance, on how I look, on how to improve, my physical appeal, more so than any other culture. If all our magazines and bulletin boards, all our music and movies reflect that securing pleasure through women in particular is prioritized, is an integral part of the societal psyche. Okay, this is part of the way the majority of our society thinks. Now, it's very important to feel good about your physical appearance. It is important, and we should try to feel good, and we should take steps to make us feel good about our physical appearance. However, we have to at the same time realize that this in no way is a measure of our true worth. While it's important to feel good about the way you look, that in no way is a measure of your real worth at all. And part of how to realize and internalize this, because it's easy for me to say it, but for you to internalize it, read about the physical decomposition of the body after death. I just buried two of my closest relatives about 6 weeks ago. My grandmother and mother-in-law died within a span of 13 days of each other. And subhanAllah, when you read and think about, and it's something we don't want to think about when it comes to our near close relatives, but it's going to happen to us. It's going to happen to you and me. You know, the body just decomposes into the basic elements of nitrogen and sulfur and so on and so forth, to the point that even the bones decompose. You know, while this is a very harsh reality to ponder about our loved ones, about ourselves, Allah is telling us something through this reality. That it is not your physical appearance that He is concerned about. Because that only marks the beginning of life. That physical decomposition, which is so harsh, such a stark reality, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only marks the beginning of true life. So that means there is something else that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to beautify. There is something else that He wants us to prepare and tone and nourish. And it's not just the body. It's more than that. It's something else. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that you all know about, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your bodies and appearances, rather He looks at your actions and your hearts. This is the most important thing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So regardless of how much pleasure we are able to experience because of our physical appeal, or how much pleasure we are able to give to others, to men, to even our husbands, because of our physical beauty, etc., this will only be a temporary experience. We want the happiness, the real happiness we desire is the one that lasts. That is the happiness that we are all seeking. That is the only happiness of value, which is why we're also enchanted with the story books we heard growing up as children. That idea of a happiness of forever. The ones that always end in that perfect fantasy land, and they lived happily ever after. If the storybook ended and they lived happily for a week, and they lived happily ever after for a month, it wouldn't appeal to us. It wouldn't settle in us. It wouldn't be a soothing bedtime story. What makes it soothing and beautiful and appealing, and something that soothes your spirit and heart and you fall asleep after it from its calmness, is because it's forever. This is the pleasure that we are seeking, the one that lasts forever. So because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed this desire within us for pleasure, for happiness, He made a fantasy land for us called Jannah. We have a fantasy land, and it's not a fantasy at all, it's real. And then He gave us a system on top of that to tell us how we could get there and how we would really have this happiness forever. And this is why He made zina haram. Zina is haram not because it brings pleasure, but because it brings a temporary pleasure that is followed by pain. It brings a temporary pleasure because of which someone experiences pleasure, but then another party is hurt and scarred forever. So that's not real happiness. That's not true pleasure. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the alternative marriage, which continues on into the akhirah. We will be with our spouses in Jannah, right? Inshallah. So there is no pleasure after which there is the fire, and no hardship is hardship after which there is Jannah, right? This is something we want to remember. Now, at the same time, I have to find a way to make Islam something I can practice in my daily life, because human beings have a hard time remaining steadfast in things that appear overwhelming to them. If Islam appears too difficult to me, I will not be able to stick the course. I will not have the staying power, which is called istiqamah, right, in Islamic terms. So I have to figure out a way to attain this eternal happiness and pleasure of akhirah while acquiring the required level of motivation and satisfaction to stay the course. How do I do that? If you don't, like Sheikh Suhaib was telling us yesterday when someone in the audience asked him at another gathering, is the grass greener on the other side? Yani, is it more fun being anonymous and doing all that haram stuff? That's what the question really meant, if you were in that session. And he was shocked. prior question. He said, and this is what I was actually going to share with you, that this question will only come from a person who has not felt pleasure in being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to experience some measure of pleasure in being Muslim, in practicing the deen. If there is no pleasure for you in Islam, if there is no pleasure for you in worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submitting to Him and following His commands, it will be nothing but an overwhelming burden. You will not be able to stick the course. You'll have temporary highs every now and then when there's an ICNA Convention or a great halaqah or a wonderful speaker, and that high will become a low very soon. So we have to reflect on something Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, one of the greatest scholars of Islam in the 7th century. He says something so beautiful. إِنَّ فِي الدُّنْيَا جَنَّةً مَنْ لَمْ يَدْخُلْهَا لَمْ يَدْخُلْ جَنَّةَ الْآخِرَةِ. In this world there is a Jannah, and the one who does not enter it will not enter the Jannah of the hereafter. Where is the Jannah? It is in our heart, in your heart and in my heart. The pleasure that we feel in aloneness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The tuma'anina, the sukoon, the tranquility and peace we feel in the worship and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we have not experienced this garden of pleasure in this world, مَا لَمْ يَدْخُلْهَا لَمْ يَدْخُلْ جَنَّةَ الْآخِرَةِ. One who does not experience this in this world, how can he or she then hope to enter the Jannah of the next world? Now, what is the secret? I'm here to tell you the secret of developing this pleasure. How do we get this pleasure in our deen? How do we transform it into a list of do's and don'ts into something I love and I can't live without? Someone who becomes zahid, indifferent to the pleasures that are haram, to the point that they have no attraction for them. Well, it lies in a simple word that I'm going to tell you, which is what the opening verse, the Sister Nishat recited, was about, or translated. It lies in the word called Rida. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. Oh, a soul who is at peace with herself. This is said to the soul, these words that I'm reciting to you from the Quran are said to the soul at the time of its departure from the body. At the moment of death, the blessed soul hears these words from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is welcoming it, welcoming the soul. O soul at peace with itself, return to your Lord. Radiyatan mardiya. Radiya, yani you, the soul is pleased. Yani it was pleased and worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the soul is about to become pleased by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the reward that He is about to give to the soul. Mardiya, both of these words are from the same root word of Rida, pleasure. Rida is pleasure. Mardiya, yani Allah is not only the soul pleased with Allah, Radiya, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with the soul. Mardiya, the soul is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Enter into my servants, enter my Jannah. Wadkhuli Jannati. Now this station of Rida, of pleasure with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the richness of the heart. This is the richness that the wealthiest person necessarily may not possess, but the poorest person may have. That they have that connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the key to happiness. This is the beginning of pleasure in this world and the combination of pleasure in the akhirah. And this is why in the morning and evening, what are we supposed to say? And from the adhkar of the morning and evening, رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ نَبِيًّا. 3 times we're supposed to say morning and evening that I am pleased with Allah as my Lord, and with Islam as my deen, and with Muhammad as my Prophet. What does this mean? That means if you're pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're pleased with everything He has commanded. You are pleased with everything He has prohibited. You don't have any resistance against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have any anger or rebellion in yourself against Him. You're not questioning any of His commands. This is why there is such an intense reward attached to the pronouncement of these words morning and evening. In fact, there's a narration that says that someone who says these words, their sins are forgiven. Not because of the words, but because of what they mean and because of the implications that they have. That I'm pleased with Islam as my deen, everything in it, everything about it makes me happy, everything I submit to. And every hadith, even if it doesn't make sense to me, even if it's hard for me to explain it to myself or my friends, but I have accepted and I am pleased with Muhammad ﷺ as my Nabi, as my Prophet. Who are you going to be asked about, sisters, in the grave? You're not going to be asked about how happy your friends were about the way you dressed, about how nicely we shape our eyebrows, which is absolutely haram, by the way. I know it's very difficult to hear, to say, but there's a clear hadith. And I'm mentioning this because this is about that we are pleased with the Prophet as our messenger. There's a clear hadith, sahih, authentic, which I myself went and researched in the library of Damascus because I know it's a big issue, which clearly says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala curses the one who shapes her eyebrows and the one who does it for another person. So, part of being pleased with the Prophet ﷺ is accepting this hadith and all the hadith that we know are from the Prophet ﷺ, not feeling any resistance against that. Now, let me tell you one thing about emotions, about feelings. Every feeling has a taste. Okay, anger tastes bitter, right? Happiness tastes sweet. We all know this, right? Iman also has a taste. And the taste bud receptor for Iman is the Rida, this pleasure with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What did the Prophet ﷺ say in an authentic hadith recorded in Sahih Imam Muslim, rahimahullah ta'ala? ذَاقَ طَعْمُ الْإِيمَانِ مَنْ رَضِيَ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ رَسُولًا. That who is the one who gets to taste Iman, who will have this taste bud receptor go off for Iman, is the one who is pleased with Allah as his or her Lord, with Islam as their deen, of Muhammad as their Rasul, like I just explained to you. So this is something we need to nurture in ourselves. Now, how do we start practicing Rida? This is the next section. How do we practice Rida? Well, the first step is what I just told you, which is to verbalize it. The Prophet ﷺ told us to verbalize, to say these words. So, inshallah, from now on, in the morning, evening, all of us, 3 times, make the niyyah. We're going to say these words. Let's say them together. رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ نَبِيًّا. Now, the Prophet ﷺ taught us to verbalize it in order to be able to internalize it. Because you can't internalize what you don't verbalize, what you don't speak about, what you don't talk about. So this forces us not just to remind us of the blessings of Islam and the Deen and Muhammad ﷺ, but to make us focus on these blessings. When you're saying morning and evening, you're focusing on these blessings. Now, what does it mean to become pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yani, you are more interested in pleasing Him than in yielding to any other societal pressure in your life, in terms of how you want to dress, what words you want to say, what social pursuits or pastimes you want to pursue. All of these things are on one side, and when it comes to pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having Rida with Him will give you the power to make that choice. When the peer pressure is high and when Shaitan is beckoning you to his way, what will allow you to make the right choice at that moment of truth is going to be this driving force of Rida. You will choose Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over any lower desires. And Sheikh Suhaib said something so inspiring yesterday when he was talking about the Prophet ﷺ and how he remembered his ummah in the highest company. He was in the Mi'raj with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At that moment, who would think of anyone else if you're in the company in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why would you think about anyone else or anything else? But he was remembering his ummah, asking for us to be saved, for us to become guided. So the Shaykh said that if the Prophet doesn't remember us, even when he's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the highest level, we don't need to remember anyone else. Why can't we remember Allah when we are with Shaitan? When He is calling us to His way, when He is beckoning us to break the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is what it means to become pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to choose Him over, it allows to choose Him over any other sin and temptation. And there's a beautiful quote of Ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu. He is the Mufassirin of the Sahaba. It's enough to be a Sahabi, but then there's quite another to be a Mufassir in explaining the Quran among them. He said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى بِقَصْرِهِ وَعِلْمِهِ جَعَلَ الرَّوْحَ وَالْفَرْحَ فِي الْيَقِينِ وَالرِّضَى وَجَعَلَ الْهَمَّ وَالْحُزْنَ بِالشَّكِّ وَالصَّبْرِ. Which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to His justice and His knowledge, created happiness and pleasure in yaqeen, in conviction, and you believe in everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated. You have firm yaqeen, firm conviction in the deen. He has made pleasure and happiness in yaqeen and being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He has created depression and sadness and worry and grief and being doubtful of the deen, and sin, and being distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot find peace except from the source of peace. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are the source of peace, and for you is peace. So if you look for peace in a war zone, you will not find it. And shaitan is at war with us. So where are you looking? What are you looking for? Will you be able to find it? Now, going on to being pleased with the Prophet ﷺ, this of course entails complete submission to the Prophet ﷺ. And you know, as believers, we are required to love the Prophet ﷺ more than our own selves, more than our families, more than our parents, more than our children. How is this possible? We don't even know the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. If we can't even tell the difference between the incidents that took place in Mecca and Medina. If we were to, ask each other, we'd be able to tell what happened first and what happened second. I mean, if we don't know this much, how can he be a role model for us? Really, practically, how can we make him a role model for our children when they're going to be out of our reach and control, and we want them to be able to look up to the Prophet's example? How will we be able to impart that? The one who does not own something is unable to give it to others. So we have to cultivate this connection to the Prophet ﷺ. And it's very beautiful when you're trying to do this with your kids. Inshallah, in about a week, myself and my family, including our children, will go for Umrah, inshallah. And my daughter, she's 8 years old, and she said, when we were talking about Medina, she said, when you go to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ, are you supposed to cry? SubhanAllah, she had the sense that there's something that we owe to this man. And that burden is so overwhelming that you can't do anything except cry when you're at his grave. So you need to nurture this connection from a young age. Because if you don't inculcate it when they're young, good luck when they're older. So this is part of being pleased with the Prophet. And no matter, let me tell you something, sisters. No matter how difficult the path of Rida may appear, the path of becoming pleased with Allah and His deen, no matter how difficult it is because of our desires, because of our short tempers, because of our own flaws, it will always be easier than the path of struggling against yourself internally, eternally for your life, being displeased with what Allah has legislated, or what He has made haram, what He has made fun, because that battle is an endless one. The Quran will never change. The hukum will never change. Something that is haram will always be haram. Something that is felt will always be felt. But who's losing? The struggle. The struggle inside that you're carrying on, the war that you continue to carry on within yourself when you're resisting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is al-Qahhar. One of the translations of al-Qahhar is the irresistible. You cannot resist Him. He cannot be resisted. His commandments cannot be resisted. So our distaste, we seek Allah's refuge from having distaste for our deen. It won't change anything in terms of the ahkam of Islam. It won't change the status of those ahkam, but it is only our status with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will go down. And everything will remain the way it was. And this is one of the rare cases where actually the noble thing to do is simply to give in. Simply to submit rather than to resist and remain distressed. And this is why Islam is submission, and submission is peace. And the greater your experience of this peace, the greater will be your experience, your share of happiness in this world. The greater your experience and happiness in this dunya. Now, what are some of the fruits of Rida? I only have a few minutes left. What are some of the great fruits of Rida? Why is it worth it? Why is it worth developing it? Why is it worth cultivating and leaving everything else for tasting it? This is one of the greatest ibadat of the heart. This is one of the greatest worships of the heart. You know how Salah and Hajj, these are ibadat of the body, right? Rida, being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is one of the greatest ibadat of the heart. You know what the Prophet ﷺ used to say about Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu? He is a Siddiq, right? I mean, the rank after prophethood is a Siddiq, right? So he has the highest rank after prophethood. And the only other person who has it among the females is Maryam. She was not a prophet, but she was a Siddiqa. Right? So this is the highest place you can possibly occupy after Nubuwwah. What did the Prophet ﷺ say about Abu Bakr? He said that Abu Bakr did not surpass you all, the whole ummah. He did not surpass you all by kathrat as-salat as-siyam, by an abundance of extra nawafil salawat, or by an extra abundance of nawafil fast. It wasn't that. But بِشَيْءٍ وَقَرَ فِي قَلْبِهِ. But he surpassed every other human being, except for the Prophet ﷺ, as something that became established firmly in his heart. And part of that is being completely pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and perfecting this station of Rida. Now, Rida, when you're pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the happiness will feel because of that, happiness is one of those feelings you can't hide. It bursts forth from your being. Some people are able to cover up their sadness or their distress or their stress. Happiness is something you cannot hide. It shows on your face. So when you have the happiness of Iman, when you have the happiness of being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this should burst forth through your actions. Like Shaykh Sulaiman, Hafidhullah, yesterday, what was he saying about his mother? The last 3 days before her life, he said she was laughing uncontrollably, smiling uncontrollably. She knew something was about to happen. SubhanAllah, perhaps she felt that she was supposed to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The happiness that a person has at that point cannot be described in words, it can only be tasted by your heart. Now, if you look at the types of Rida, we talked a little bit about and you are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He is pleased with you. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can really appreciate your actions. Sometimes we may do things with a very good intention and completely mess up. Or it may have been done well, but it's not appreciated by others. And we feel sometimes so hurt by this. So underappreciated, like moms overworked and underappreciated or underpaid. And sometimes we get very emotionally distressed about this. Let me tell you something. No one can feel and know your exhaustion except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one knows the truthfulness, the sincerity of your intention. No one has any expectations for people appreciating you. But what about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He is ash-shakur. كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the people of Jannah that they're striving for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, that was what He showed appreciation for. So do it for the one who can really appreciate you and really know the pain and exhaustion that you put into it, that no one else can know and feel, even your closest friend or spouse, because they're not going through what you're, but He knows. So do it for the one, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where it really counts. And this is one thing I'll tell you as someone who's happily married for about 10 years now. Human relationships, marriage, it's beautiful, right? These are all beautiful things that come into our lives. Sisterhood, parents, children, this is part of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has beautified this world. And alhamdulillah, it's all halal and we can make these means for our Jannah, inshallah. But the lofty challenge is to enjoy human relationships without becoming overly invested in them to the point where we lose our focus from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only place where we should be fully, completely invested is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is the only relationship that will never disappoint you. Everyone else, your best friend, your perfect husband, your beloved child, everyone has the full potential to deeply hurt you. Knowingly or unknowingly. But someone will never hurt your sincerity, will never, even an atom's weight, right? Even if there's an atom's weight of good. And subhanAllah, my son was just telling me from the science textbook, I had no idea, that in one atom, one particle of sand, if you count the number of atoms that go into one particle of sand, it's more than the number of human beings on earth. Like mind-blowing facts, the qudra, the power of Allah, and Allah, even that much atoms weight of good Allah does not neglect. It does not go unnoticed. It does not go unrewarded. And the same thing with, of course, same thing with sin. Now the last 5 minutes that we have, which is impossible, but inshallah, we want to talk about the highest level of Rida. So, the Prophet ﷺ, we have many scenes from his seerah, and one of the most heartbreaking, beautiful scenes is the scene of Ta'if, right? Where the people of Ta'if, throw him out, and he's stoned by the boys of that village, and he bleeds profusely to the point where he falls unconscious. And then he begins his, heart-wrenching dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma inni ashku ilayka dha'fa quwwati wa hawani 'ala an-nas. he says, "Oh Allah, to you I complain about the weakness of my strength and how little I am in front of the people, how lowly these people are considering me." But then what does he go on to say? That if you are pleased with me, then I have no care for anything that is happening to me. If you are pleased with me, then all of this that is going on in this world, this pain that I'm experiencing, melts away. That all I want is your pleasure, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this really, in pain, in times of pain and distress, in times of happiness and pleasure, our focus, inshallah, is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see this when the Prophet went to the death of Ibrahim, for example, his son, who was still breastfeeding. He was in this the cutest stage and age that a child can be at, that pre-toddler age. This is when Ibrahim, about 18 months, he was taken from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet was crying, and he said that indeed, our hearts are saddened and our eyes shed tears, but we do not say anything except that which is pleasing to our Lord. So emotions are very important to manage, especially for women, because we are extremely emotional. And this is part of our power, but it can also be part of our spiritual downfall if we don't manage them properly. If we get too angry, and we say things, or if we get too emotionally invested, and then we're disappointed and burnt. So we have to be very careful managing our emotions and investing them only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have these guidelines in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us that moderation even in our emotions. He says, don't be too sad about that which you missed, that which you didn't get, that which you were deprived of. Don't feel too overwhelmingly sad about it. And don't become overly happy, don't feel too much pain about what afflicts you, and also in another place, don't become too overly happy about what you receive. There should be moderation even in our emotions. Now, the last thing that I want to close with is, I don't know how many of you attended the last session in the main hall with Sheikh Nasser Qadi when he was recognizing Dr. Hawa Abdi. Okay, a few of you, okay. Alright, so most of you missed it, subhanAllah. He told us about this amazing legend. He called her someone who really inspired him, a Somali doctor who worked against the odds with the war civil war in Somalia, where people were actually coming to her clinic and threatening to kill her patients. And she stood there and said that you have to kill me before you are able to get through me and kill my patients. And subhanAllah, all of us should research her. She's about to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. She was on TED Talks, nominated by Glamour magazine, so on and so forth. What I'm going to share with you is when Sheikh Nasser Qadi called her to the stage, everyone rose up. And it was a standing ovation where it wasn't just the hands that were clapping for her. You could tell it was the heartbeats of the people in that room, the men and the women, overwhelmed by the admiration that they felt, the awe that they felt for this beautiful Muslim woman, this beautiful role model for us. And immediately my mind fast forwarded to the scene when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will call the name of certain people on the day of judgment. And He will be the one honoring us. These are human beings honoring us, and there was such an iman rush in the room that I don't know how you could have remained without tears, because of the iman rush that you could feel in that room when she was being honored that way by a group of believers and called on to the stage with all the shuyukh. What about when the audience are the angels and the days of Al-Qiyamah, and in attendance is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Isa and Musa and Nuh, and who's calling you to center stage? None other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the worlds. And He's saying to you, Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah, fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. Subhanaka wa bihamdika la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.